Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com, an affiliate of the Hockey News. My name is Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and this busy week keeps rolling on. We really don't have time to breathe here. If we say something now, it might be outdated in an hour, so we're going to try to talk about stuff that isn't going to be outdated, and the stuff that is going to potentially be outdated, well, just know that your boys tried their best. But before we get into that, obviously, we're going to talk about Kris Letang winning the Masterton Trophy last night at the NHL Awards. We are going to talk a little bit about Connor McDavid because he won 4 awards last night and just continues to bring home the hardware, except for the one that matters the most. We'll give you some of the ideas for who could be a trade partner with the Pittsburgh Penguins based off of what Kyle Dubas said to the media on Friday. And then we had a listener question, which we'll address in the final segment of our show. But Horwat, before we get into trade partners, listener questions, which is about the championship window, before we even get into Connor McDavid or McJesus or whatever you like to call him, let's talk a little bit about Kris Letang. He's awarded the Masterton Trophy by the NHL, who is given to the player who most exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to the sport of hockey. I said it yesterday on my episode of Penguins to Go, and I'll say it again here today. It just also feels like the perfect definition for Kris Letang in general, even before this season.
Yep. This is about as much of a lifetime achievement award as you can get, it feels almost. It was sure a lot of things culminating together in this one particular season, and that one particular month span, almost 2-month span of a second stroke in his playing career to lower body injury that kept him out, before the death of his father, and then even after he was ready to come back from that, he still had to deal with that injury. Just to come back and still play 64 games, put up good numbers for his level at the age of 35, just turned 36 this offseason, and still playing at the top of his game. It's incredible to see. And then, like we mentioned, it's a lifetime achievement award almost, considering all of the things that had happened throughout his career, even from the early years of his NHL days. And this is well-deserved for him no matter what way you look at it. It was a long time coming almost. And, man, having his whole family there was all the more special for him. And I thought having P.O. Joseph be the one that kind of told the story on stage made it even sweeter, considering what Letang means to Joseph and for the whole team.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. You mentioned the lower body injury that Kris Letang went through, which was literally nothing compared to the other stuff he went through over that 6-week span. But the lower body injury, P.O. Joseph broke some news there. He said broken foot. And everybody's like, oh, I was like, okay, I guess that's what the lower body injury was. I didn't know he actually broke his freaking foot in the middle of all of that. But no, as you mentioned, I mean, Kris Letang deserved the Masterton Trophy for what happened to him off the ice alone. But the fact that he was able to not only come back and play, but the icing on the cake was that 4-point performance in his first game back, was it not? I mean, 2 goals, 2 assists from a defenseman, no less, and one of those goals being a game winner in overtime. I mean, the story is it's more of a grim fairy tale than a Cinderella story, because obviously what he went through was horrible, and you don't wish that on anybody. But the way that he was able to persevere and come through that, the Masterton Trophy, I know that he said last night, and I quote, "I've always dreamt of being up here to receive a trophy, but that was not the one. It always means that something bad happened." And yes, that is what the Masterton Trophy is usually utilized for, giving it to the player that has been through a lot and still has been committed to the sport and shown perseverance. But I mean, just the way that he has been throughout his entire career, the way that he has been able to perform, you could tell it means a lot more to him, and it just means a lot more seeing it go to him, as somebody who obviously has watched him play his entire career, and that's how I speak of it, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, it's well deserved, and it was you don't want to say that this is an award that's weird to say that he was a lock for from the beginning, right? Does it feel weird to say that we kind of not knew this was coming, but could have been the odds-on favorite a long time ago for this.
Mhm.
And part of it is, yeah, it's just tragic that that kind of thing happens. There is a bright side to it of that means he still performed. You know, it's not like he took that time off. It's not like he took the season off to said, you know, screw it, that's the end of the year, or you know, called it quits or whatever. He came right back. He missed, oh, I forget what the number was now, 5 games after the stroke. I mean, the broken foot kept him out longer. Think of that for a second.
Yeah.
But it's usually because something horrible and bad and tragic happens, and that did. But it is the fact that he was able to persevere through it, and with his family and teammates by his side the entire way. He also continued to say that this trophy wasn't for him; it was for his family because, you know, they stuck around through the whole thing. They were there throughout the entire time, and his teammates were there as well. It was a team award almost too, but it's good on him still. It just does feel weird to say he was a lock for this months ago.
It is a strange feeling, and it's a strange feeling to, you know, you're not celebrating that he won the Masterton. I think you're just happy that, you know, through it all, the world recognizes what
Yeah.
he went through, and his story gets to be told on a national level on TNT by P.O. Joseph
Mhm.
and really just by the league. And it's something that just highlights one of the best humans, one of the best players, and just one of the best, you know, I went in the wrong order there. Humans, players, defensemen, but it should be one of the best defensemen, one of the best players, one of the best humans in the history of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Letang is the first Penguin to win this award since Mario Lemieux did it back in 1993.
Yeah, it's good on him. Yeah, it is what you figured, Siri. Yeah, it's a great honor for him. It is all good on him. And I do want to throw a quick note on P.O. Joseph meeting Willie O'Ree. And did you see the inside of P.O. Joseph's suit jacket with a
I did
picture
not see that, but I
with
heard about it.
yeah, with a bunch of pictures of uh prominent black athletes. Willie O'Ree was among those photos. They didn't show a picture of the entire inside, but I could vaguely make out there was Willie O'Ree, Tiger Woods, and Muhammad Ali at least. I'm sure there's a few more. But he got Willie O'Ree to sign that part, which is kind of cool. So
That's cool.
also shout out to P.O. Joseph for his uh, little moment that he was able to have there. He said that he was more nervous meeting and being around Willie O'Ree than he was speaking in front of the crowd. So good on him. And also, it's like I said, it was awesome that it was P.O. Joseph, the one that spoke on Letang during the ceremony.
Now, I don't want to get flamed in the comments for this, and I agree with you. Like, great that P.O. Joseph was there. He mentioned in his speech that he and Kris Letang watched every episode of The Entourage together. I guess it's not The Entourage; it's Entourage.
Yeah,
I've never seen a single second of Entourage. Have you?
I've seen the first couple of episodes, and I saw the movie when it came out.
Oh,
I remember
okay.
me and a buddy of mine said we're gonna go see the movie without ever seeing the show. It was after the movie I started watching a couple episodes and then just kind of never got back into it.
Mhm.
But I remember it being a good movie and it being a phenomenal show. I think my dad watched a ton of it
Oh,
whenever I was
okay.
younger. But also just knowing some of the bits of Entourage, yeah, that absolutely strikes me as a Kris Letang show.
Yeah.
1,000%.
I mean, it kind of seems like it, and especially, I mean, I don't know. It's just a show that I've heard many good things about.
Mhm.
Obviously, everybody has quoted it. And let me know in the comments, is it worth me binging Entourage? I believe it's on Max now because
Probably.
everything with Mark Wahlberg is on Max, even his own little reality show, Wall Street, where he just basically just does free publicity for all of his companies, and considering he has like 80. But no, I thought it was fun. You know, you always like getting those little insights into their personalities and players' lives. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's something that I had heard before, that Kris Letang was being a mentor to P.O. Joseph, and obviously it makes sense, both being French Canadian. But you know, a lot of people don't know that P.O. Joseph lived with Kris Letang. P.O. Joseph was under Kris Letang's win. It was almost like a Mario Lemieux, Sidney Crosby situation there. By the way, just they were able to connect immediately. So it's fun that they were able to have that moment together. It's nice to see P.O. Joseph be able to be there for somebody that's been there for him. And also, you know, the night obviously belongs to Kris Letang in the eyes of everybody that covers the team and follows the Pittsburgh Penguins. But The night did also belong on an NHL national stage to Connor McDavid. I mean, cleaned up at the NHL awards. 4 trophies go to him last night. 2 of them were already obviously figured out because the Art Ross and the Rock Richard are counting stats trophies, which he had already won, but he gets presented with those last night. He was ridiculous this season, Horwat. I mean, that doesn't even begin to explain what he was able to do during the regular season. He wins the Art Ross Trophy, the Rocket Richard, the Hart Trophy, and the Ted Lindsay Award, which are basically the same award, just awarded by 2 different groups of people. He scored 153 points during the regular season, including 64 goals, and he had 195 of 196 first place votes. Sidney Crosby, however, did finish with a couple votes for the Hart Trophy, tied 18th in voting with 1 4th place vote and 1 5th place vote. But Connor McDavid's big night at the awards brings his total trophy count to 5 NHL All-Star selections, 5 Art Ross Trophy seasons, 1 Rocket Richard Trophy winner, which I thought he had won it before, but I guess not. 3-time Lester B. Pearson Award winner, which is also the Ted Lindsay Award now, and a 3-time Hart Trophy winner. The question then becomes, Horwat, does he eventually have to win the big one to be considered a top 5 player of all time?
Probably. Absolutely. Because a lot of times everyone will take, and rightfully so, take playoff performance into this. And not that his playoff performance lacks by any stretch of the means. I mean, just this past season, in 12 games played, he had 20 points. The season before that, he played 16 games. I believe both of those were... No, he made it to the third round. He would have to make it to the third round. 16 games the season prior. 33 points. Didn't even play in the last round, and he finished that postseason as the leader in points. People were trying to make legitimate arguments he should have won the Conn Smythe despite not playing in the Stanley Cup final at all. This season, same thing, though. Those numbers are ridiculous, and that doesn't... But still, you need to find a way to win. And I know you need the team to do that, but that is the biggest trophy to win. And this is the one that everyone says, like, yeah, it's great to win these personal awards. It's great to win the Art Ross. It's great to win the Hart Trophy. It's great to have all these personal accomplishments, but it means nothing if a Stanley Cup does not somehow, some way follow. And he has to be able to do that. I mean, when you look at the discussions of the top 5 players in most sports, how many of them don't have a championship trophy? I mean, that's a hard question to answer. It's because you have to make arguments for people. There's no clear cut. If you have a championship ring or a championship trophy under your belt, then you're right up there with the rest of them.
There's one player, because as of right now, Connor McDavid, absolutely ridiculous, putting up point totals that we have not seen in the salary cap era. Almost said the Stanley Cup era. We've seen point totals like that in the Stanley Cup era. That's called Wayne Gretzky. But he's put up all these crazy point totals in the salary cap era that we've never seen before in this era, but he doesn't have that Stanley Cup. And that's the big thing. When you look at the top 10 point scores, because right now what he's doing and the pace that he's on, he's going to finish as top 10, potentially even top 5 in NHL history in point scoring. When you look at the top 10, there is one player that didn't win a Stanley Cup in that top 10. Because number 1 is Gretzky. He won 4. 2 is Yager. He won 2. 3 is Messier. He won 6 Stanley Cups. Gordie Howe had 4. Ron Francis had 2. Yzerman had 1. Lemieux had 2. Sakic had 1. Esposito had 1. The only other player that's up there is Marcel Dion. Didn't win a Stanley Cup. So at the end of the day, I get it's different eras, and I get Connor McDavid is doing this in an era where you do not see scoring like this. At the end of the day, if you don't win a Stanley Cup, you end up being placed in the Marcel Dion category. Is it going to be different for McDavid? Maybe, because it's a different era and it's a different viewpoint where he is above and beyond anybody else in the game right now, but he just can't get over that hump. He can't even get to the Stanley Cup final, let alone win a Stanley Cup. I think it's massively important. I think if you want to be considered Mount Rushmore, if you want to be considered top 5, you have to win a Stanley Cup. I wouldn't put him over Crosby, even if he passes Crosby in points, if he doesn't win a single Stanley Cup. his
That's
entire career.
that's totally fair because here is the thing of it, right? So if he doesn't win a cup in his career, McDavid will get slotted into that Marcel Dion territory. When you were listing off the names, I'm trying to think who is in the top 10 of all time scoring and doesn't have a Stanley Cup. I couldn't think of the name. First name that I came up with was Eric Lindros. Forgetting injuries kind of shortened his career and screwed up a lot of things with points, but up until recently, up until Alex Ovechkin started this hunt for Gretzky's goal record, Marcel Dion was also in the top 5 of goal scoring. A lot of people forget about that. He's 6 now because Ovechkin flew in, but 731 career goals for Marcel Dion. Clearly, top 5 of goal scoring, top 10 of points, and I couldn't name him. Couldn't come up with it. Why? Maybe because his name's not on the cup. No, maybe that's not the exact reason. He also played in a less than notable hockey market for most of his career in Los Angeles, but it's just you forget, but then it's always that, oh yeah, that guy. You forget quite often because he's not the cream of the crop, if you will. And I mean, I don't know what Marcel Dion has done since his playing days. Like sometimes, like a lot of those names you list off, also like Marc Messier has a trophy named after him that he hands out himself, handpicks a player, which is weird. Who's some of the names he said? He said Yzerman's in there. He's running a team. Francis is running a team. Maybe that's also part of why you remember these guys.
Yager's still playing.
Yager's still playing. And there's obviously he was also a Penguin and won those 2 cups in his first 2 years. You remember those guys, obviously. I mean, Connor McDavid has a phenomenal chance of slotting in right with those guys when it's all said and done. But a cup does need to come along with it, or he does just fall into that Marcel Dion, oh yeah, that guy territory. And there's nothing wrong with that. Clearly, Marcel Dion, one of the greatest of all time, but it doesn't have a ring, doesn't have his name on the cup, and that's what hurts the most.
Now, I think at the end of the day, Connor McDavid will be remembered as a much better player than Marcel Dion. I don't know if say much better. Again, I feel like we're crapping on Marcel Dion. He doesn't deserve it. He's a hockey Hall of
also
Famer.
never saw him
He's
play.
top 100.
I mean,
his last season was 1989. So, 7 years prior to either of us being on this earth. But, at the end of the day, and you're talking about top 5, that is a hard nut to crack there. Sidney Crosby has been a serial winner throughout his entire career, and he's put up the numbers, and he did it through injury. There was a point where people thought Crosby might not play again, and that was in 2012. That was 10 years ago. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. He's put up copious amounts of points. He's led his team to the playoffs every year except for this year since then. I think the conversation, even though a lot of conversations shouldn't revolve around championships, especially in a team sport, when you get to the top 5 and all things are equal across the board around there, these guys are all top line players, can't find an issue in their game at all, played either for a long time or played extremely well for a short time, then you just look at it and you say, sometimes winning the big one has to be in there. And even Alex Ovechkin has one. And if Alex Ovechkin wasn't in the same conference as Sidney Crosby, he'd probably have more, because Crosby beat him 3 times with 3 of the best teams that Alex Ovechkin was ever on. And Crosby went on to win the Stanley Cup all 3 of those years. So it's an interesting discussion that will be had many, many times, especially considering what Connor McDavid has got 5-6 years of being the best player in the league undoubtedly left. And then he'll probably play for more after that, depending on, obviously, hopefully that he'll be healthy, because you want to see excellence play for as long as excellence can play. But there's a lot of that story left to be written. But even if he keeps this pace and doesn't win a Stanley Cup, he doesn't pass Crosby in my eyes. And I think you echo that sentiment. And, it might be a homerism play because we grew up watching Sidney Crosby, but it's the opinion that I have. And it's the opinion that I would assume a lot of people share as well, because winning in professional sports can sometimes become everything.
Yeah, rightfully so. It's just the way it should be.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break after we went on a little bit longer about that conversation. But, we can wax poetic about Sidney Crosby and the history of the NHL all day long. But let's talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins heading into next season. Kyle Dubas has a lot of work to do. We'll see what teams he could be dancing with at the NHL draft later this week. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by Inside the Penguins, who is an affiliate of the Hockey News. Thank you to everybody for tuning into this episode. I'm Nick Brlansky. That's Nick Horwat. And Kyle Dubas, just over 3 weeks as Pittsburgh Penguins president of hockey operations. He spoke with the media last week in Pittsburgh before departing for Nashville, but currently he sits in the Lions' Den in Nashville, Tennessee, with 32 other general managers getting ready for tomorrow's first round of the NHL draft. He said last week that, quote, I think we're in a good spot and fortunate, we'll get back to that in a second, and fortunate that the cap has remained flat because it allows us to take on people from other clubs that can bring us good value and have us push to contend. Who may those clubs be? We'll talk about in a second, but Horwat, I never thought I'd hear a general manager or president of hockey operations or whoever say, we're actually fortunate that this cap has remained flat. Interesting take by Kyle Dubas there.
It is. It's definitely interesting. I just think the way he's had to work in Toronto the last few years, the flat cap hurt him. I think maybe he's coming from the mindset of, I haven't had a dime to spend since before William Nylander held out.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's got $20 million in space to work with, which is more than even the Penguins are used to. So maybe he's looking at it as, we have more space to work with than normal. Sure, we wanted to go at more, but we have a ton of space to work with. And he's probably looking at it as, well, here's the cap space we have. It's a flat cap. He's said he's not trying to make any huge plays in free agency. He's not trying to, I forget what else. Oh, it was trade the first round pick. He's not trying to make any huge plays in free agency. So you're not expecting him to fill up that 20,000 or 20 million with 3 names. He's not trying to do that. So he's going to utilize the fact that this flat cap is affecting everybody, and that includes these cap strapped teams.
Mm-hmm.
If every team gets that relief, suddenly it's a little harder to take big contracts from other teams, which seems to be what he's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the Penguins aren't, at the moment at least, right up against the cap, but other teams are already. I think the Canucks are over already.
They're not. They're not there yet.
They have guys on LTIR. They will be over once those guys are back, which...
No, as of right now, cap friendly accounts for that, because here's what I'll say. Bottom 5 teams in salary cap space right now, according to capfriendly.com. 5th is the New York Islanders. They have $4.5 million in space. 4th is the defending Stanley Cup champion, the Vegas Golden Knights, with $3.4 million. 3rd is the Calgary Flames. They have 1.25. Oof, that's a rough space to be in. The Tampa Bay Lightning are 2nd, as they always are, normally in the top 3. $450,000 currently in cap space as of right now. And number 1 is the Montreal Canadiens with negative $1.2 million in cap space, but Carey Price will be heading to LTIR again, which will create space, which will get them out of that top spot.
Yeah, and as I look at the Canucks thing again, I think it is that they have the cap space right now. They just have multiple RFAs to sign that are going to crush that number that they have. That includes Ethan Baird, Travis Dermott. I'm missing one. Oh, Vitaly Kravtsov. Yeah, they're in a weird situation. They're going to be over pretty soon, especially if, their current LTIR is Tanner Pearson, don't know, Tucker Poolman, possibly because that team's not good, and Ethan Baird.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. And that's exactly the kind of team that, believe me, I don't want to, but that's exactly the kind of team that Kyle Dubas is probably eyeing up as, you got players you need to get rid of. Let's make something work.
Well, is that the first time? I believe, I've never heard of a Vancouver Pittsburgh trade rumor, especially, over the past couple of seasons. That just doesn't happen, Horwat. It just, I don't think there's any player over there, or maybe 5 players over there that have been rumored to be going to the Pittsburgh Penguins over the past 3 seasons. Maybe eventually it'll happen. But no, if you had to choose a player before, I have 3 teams here, and they're 3 of those 5
Mhm.
teams that I mentioned earlier is the teams with the lowest amount of cap space, and it's not the Montreal Canadiens. So you can pick from 3 of the 4 and guess who I'm going to go with those 3. Who from the Canucks would you want? Like, who would you want to target? Or would you want Kyle Dubas to target if you're looking at their roster? Because honestly, at this point, let's fish in a different pond.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I'm a big fan of players coming home. Huge fan of that. I love when players play for their home team. Not JT Miller, please. Any other time, give me JT Miller not on that contract, and maybe we have this discussion for real. That contract is egregious. I don't want to go anywhere near it. I didn't want Ron Hextall to go anywhere near it. I didn't want Ron Burke or Kris Pryor to go anywhere near it, and yet they went near it a lot.
Mhm.
Now that they're gone, I don't want Kyle Dubas to go anywhere near it.
Yeah.
I don't think Jim Rutherford should have gone anywhere near it,
No.
but here they are. Other than that, I mean, if you're maybe able to get Brock Besser out of there, I know he doesn't want to anymore, but he also doesn't have a clause. Maybe if you're able to do something there, Connor Garland could be interesting. There's still good trade targets in Vancouver. You just have to avoid a certain Pittsburgh native. Actually, Pittsburgh native, I will suddenly use my geography skills and say East Palestine, Ohio native.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are the usual suspects, obviously, when you're talking about those guys. Honestly, when I look at that team, I would say screw those 3 with 1 year left on his deal. If they need some cap relief, I'll take Anthony Beauvillier.
That's another good choice.
I would much prefer Beauvillier over Miller and that albatross. Again, Miller would be fine
Yeah.
if that was a 4-year deal. That's not a 4-year deal. That
Yeah.
is an 8-year contract that should not have been signed.
I also don't like the $8 million cap hit, but that's just me.
Well, you can live with the $8 million cap hit when you have Crosby getting ready to probably take a pay cut in 2 years, and when you have Malkin who just took a pay cut, when you have Letang that just took a pay cut, when you have, goaltending that you're gonna have to pay more for, but for the love, let's not pay $8 million for our goaltending situation unless it's a guy named Connor Hellebuck. So, if I'm looking at that and I'm picking one player, I'm saying you need cap relief. Anthony Beauvillier has 1 year left on his deal at $4.125 million and would be a phenomenal middle 6 piece for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, and I'll bring this name back up. It sucks they butchered the Tanner Pearson situation.
Yeah, but I
That would
don't
have been
want
a fun player to return for the time.
to.
He's 30 now. I mean, it would have been nice last year to do that, but again, they butchered that situation. And I mean, who else is on this lineup?
I think I have ill will towards Tanner Pearson for 2 reasons. One, because you like him so much because he was an LA King and won a Stanley Cup with the LA Kings. And 2, because he was the return for Carl Hagelin in a trade that was so misguided by Jim Rutherford that should just not have happened. I mean, you trade players like that just because you need to shake up the room. You got no value in it. And it made no sense at the time. And if you're going to trade somebody, it didn't make sense. But let's not continue to talk about the Vancouver Canucks because that really hijacked 9 minutes of this segment. But looking at teams that I could see being potential trade partners, considering what Kyle Dubas mentioned to the media last Friday at Cranberry, Tampa Bay Lightning are certainly one of them. We've seen them multiple times have to deal with cap casualties. I mean, Andre Palat, last season, Tyler Johnson, a few seasons before that. They currently need to sign 4 forwards and a backup goalie at the moment. Already mentioned that they are cap strapped to heck and back. I could see Anthony Cirelli becoming one of those cap casualties for Tampa. I mean, they love their team. He has 8 years left on his deal at $6.25 million. So you're paying a lot of money for a long time, and it has to be a good fit for Anthony Cirelli. But on the Tampa Bay side, they have Steven Stamkos with 1 year left on his contract. Doesn't seem like, he's going to drop off the face of the earth as far as talent-wise. And you have Braden Point for 7 more years. Do you really, if you're that team, want to pay $6.25 million for a third line center in Anthony Cirelli. I know he's a great two-way guy. He gets Selke votes a lot. He can score. He's a big playoff performer. He has Stanley Cup rings. But I could see him being one. The other name on there, even though it doesn't really offer much cap relief for them, is Brandon Hagel. Because what are they doing? I mean, they spent a lot of money on him, and then they give, was it Nick Paul, a lot of money, the other trade deadline acquisition they made, and it's like, what are we doing here with Brandon Hagel? So those are the two names I could see potentially being squeezed out of Tampa, but I know Kyle Dubas said, you get to do this and you get players back for less than you should. You're still probably going to have to pay a decent amount for either of those two players. Maybe not a first rounder, but you're going to have to pay.
The thing about Anthony Cirelli is the fact that contract is just starting.
Yeah, this is going to be the first year.
Yeah, and that's from the Tampa Bay Lightning perspective, how you that's just one of those deals you just can't trade. It's just starting, and because then that just becomes bad PR. It's you just signed the guy to this deal, and you're getting rid of him before he even played a second on that deal. I mean,
yeah,
it's bad PR, but in the same time, JT Miller might have the same situation happen to him.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a bit of a different situation. Everyone agrees that's an egregious contract, and they were trying to get out from under it before it started last season. This is just, the deal has yet to really begin, and it's a thing you can do. Totally. There are no clauses attached to it. You can sign it, have it signed, and then just be like, and just say, I'm wiping my hands of it. It's gone. The thing is, it's just bad PR and weird for the team to do. Those are my thoughts on those kind of deals and trades.
And here's the thing with the Cirelli one. It's a stretch. It's a push. Yeah. The Tampa Bay Lightning in general are a push. I don't know. I mean, Julian Brisebois and before that, Steve Yzerman, they're cap wizards, and the way that they've handled and been able to keep that team relatively together throughout the years. So again, it's hard to forecast what the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to do. And really with Cirelli, maybe they see him as their second line center after next year. Maybe they just won't bring back Steven Stamkos, or Stamkos, similar to what Crosby's going to do, is going to sign a deal that's much cheaper and just want to be, second fiddle on a contending team. Maybe he'll say, I'll move over to wing. You can bounce Braden Point up to the top line and put Cirelli as the second liner, and I'll be a winger on one of those top six lines, and it'll still be great. So, Tampa's a stretch. That's why I have them at number 3 is trade partners for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Also, I just think that when you look at that team, Kyle Dubas has an intimate knowledge of everybody on that team because he's gone up head-to-head with them 2 straight years in the postseason and also in that division since he took over the Toronto Maple Leafs 5 years ago. So I see Tampa being an option. Calgary Flames are another one. They need to sign 2 forwards, so they don't have very much work left to do, but at the same time, they might look to revamp with a team that just missed the playoffs and just got a new general manager. I mean, Elias Lindholm, anybody? Now that's, again, a stretch similar to the Cirelli thing, but Andrew Mangiapane, Blake Coleman, those 2 names are names of guys that I could see being in that same stratosphere from what Dubas was mentioning on Friday.
Could be, yeah. That's another team that all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, is shipping everybody and their mother off of this team. And it's not even through their own fault. It's a bunch of players saying, we don't want to play here anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they canned the guy they didn't like playing for, but there must be something else going on there. It's very interesting. Whenever the Tyler Toffoli thing happened, I remember I texted you and said, where is Ron Hextall when you need him? Here's your old buddy, Tyler Toffoli.
Yeah.
And that's a genuine option. 4.25 for 1 year left. Got something left in the tank, clearly. I mean, he's 31, but I mean, yeah, he's a right winger. We need left wing depth.
If you can get retention on that, then 100%. But you're going to have to, throw in maybe a second rounder that the Penguins don't have to get that retained.
I mean, for 1 year, I think you take the bite and just kind of roll. But
is he a top 6 guy or a bottom 6 guy? That's the question.
He might be able to float through either one. I mean, depending on where he plays. I mean, 73 points this past season. That's top 6 numbers. Top 6 numbers, yes, especially.
Season 73 points, but also look at his role on that team, which he's not going to have the same on the Penguins. That's my biggest issue.
I mean, no, you're right, but then you put those numbers. Yeah, you have to subtract some additions there, but I still think he would be able to produce in the bottom six, and that's something this team needs is a bottom six producer. We saw it work with Phil Kessel,
We did.
and clearly two
We
different
did.
players,
But
but
I think that's also an exception and not the rule when it comes to what you saw from the Penguins' third line in 2016.
that's fair. But I think I'm just throwing Toffoli out there as also probably a long shot, but definitely someone that I'd be interested in. I mean, he hasn't had a bad season, it looks like, going through these numbers. I mean, the only thing that might give me a hiccup is, all right, you're not playing Tyler Toffoli in the fourth line. How well did he play with Jeff Carter in LA?
Nope. I don't
There it
care.
is.
I don't care. I really don't, because guess what? If we're building teams based on what happened in 2014, then free agency would be the way to go. Jonathan Taves, Vladimir Tarasenko, Patrick Kane and his broken freaking hip. Yeah, let's grab them. Tyler Toffoli added onto it. I mean, listen, if we could exchange Tyler Toffoli and his 1 year left for Jeff Carter and his 1 year left, 100%
Now
would
we're
do.
talking.
But also, the Calgary Flames are not run by a bunch of imbeciles, and that would be the worst. Not to mention Jeff Carter has a no movement clause because he who shall not be named a second time on this podcast is an idiot. But no,
We will talk about that man so often. We have no choice.
it would, again, it's just it's the state of the team right now. But if I'm choosing, I want more of an Andrew Mangiapane or a Blake Coleman than I want a Tyler Toffoli. Even with the 1 year left, I would just, I don't know. It does not feel like Tyler Toffoli would fit the vision of what Mike Sullivan is going for next season, personally.
Who knows? And I'm with you on the Mangiapane. I'd much rather have the younger, albeit more expensive, but the younger, probably speedier option in Andrew Mangiapane. Blake Coleman is an interesting choice. No trade clause, though, so it gets hard. Also, 31. I don't know. I think it goes, in my eyes, Mangiapane, then Toffoli. That's just me, though, for this team specifically.
Okay. Hey, listen, that is
Also,
your personal preference.
Noah Hannafin. We haven't talked about defensemen yet in this situation, have we?
This is true. This is true. I mean, defenseman, interesting situation for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Noah Hannafin would be great. I would love to see Noah Hannafin come to the Pittsburgh Penguins. But again, what are the Flames looking to do next season? Like, are you looking to... They're in a similar situation to the Pittsburgh Penguins, minus the fact that the Penguins have star players that are aging. The Flames are a middling team at the moment, which is what the Penguins were last season, that has made the playoffs 1 year, missed the playoffs another year, and when they get to the playoffs, they don't do crap. So how do you get over the hump there? They don't have a lot of cap space. They have you're not running back the same team that missed the playoffs last season. I can tell you that much. And you have a new general manager. So whose head's on the chopping block? Are they looking to burn it down and rebuild? Are people actually looking forward to playing for the Calgary Flames anymore? We don't know. But Hannafin's a good name to add to that list. But I think regardless, we just put out 4 names that would make complete and utter sense for the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Calgary Flames. Okay. Whether they actually have the conversation or not, the Flames should be a trade partner for the Penguins. At least they qualify as a very interesting trade partner for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Absolutely. From Mangiapane, Coleman, Toffoli to Hannafin. And you know what? You wanted to get stupid crazy? Jacob Markstrom. That one's a stretch, but...
I think he's magic beans. I really think he's magic beans. Exactly. I don't think you're paying for what, like, you're not getting for what you're paying for that guy, whether it's in the trade or the contract. Dan Vladar would be great if the Penguins had another goaltender that was better than Dan Vladar, but
exactly.
No.
See, this is a gold mine. This is where Kyle Dubas should be looking. It's the conclusion we're coming to.
So maybe the Calgary Flames are the number 1 team and not the other team that I have listed here, which is a team that, you know, has basically traded in cap casualties over the past 2 seasons. You look at Nate Schmidt, you look at Marc-Andre Fleury. It's the defending champs. The Vegas Golden Knights have very little cap space, as they have done basically since inception. They need to sign Adin Hill. They say they want to bring back Ivan Barbashev too. What do they do with Robin Leonard? Is he going to play again, or is he going to be LTIR the rest of his career? Who does that leave open? Keegan Colasar you like, but doesn't offer much cap relief. Nick Waugh, who our buddy Jacob Puntori over at Inside the Penguins said he likes. $3 million cap hit for him. That makes a lot of sense, although paying $3 million for a fourth liner is pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Riley Smith is the interesting one to me because you bring
Mm.
back Barbashev. Riley Smith's a little expensive there, especially when you're going to put Barbashev on that top line. So Riley Smith, to me, becomes the next potential cap casualty for the Vegas Golden Knights.
That one's interesting because it will be hard to pry any of those 6 players, their core 6, if you will, out of Vegas before a banner raising. Right? It's going to be hard to pry one of those 6 out before that. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it.
No, I don't think they care about the banner raising. I don't think, listen, they do, but not in the face of business. What has Vegas shown us time and time again? Who gives a crap about your feelings?
Yep.
We're doing this for the betterment of the team. If Riley Smith being traded is for the betterment of the team, they're going to say you can watch that banner raising on television and you can get your ring when you come back to Vegas.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it would be all the same. I mean, over the past few years, we've seen some great additions to Cup teams not be there for things like that. Nazem Kadri comes to mind right away with Colorado.
Yep.
Or you could say Jack Johnson with Colorado, but they played Chicago and they let him skate out for that, which was kind of cool. Also different situation, different players. Not like he did that much.
Yeah. Blake Coleman, Tampa.
Yeah.
Same
Blake
with
Coleman in Tampa.
Who else was on there? Yanni Gord, Tampa.
Yeah, it definitely
happens.
It happens. It's just they put so much of those 6 guys into this cup run. Still though, we've seen, like you said, we've seen time and time again that front office doesn't care about your feelings.
There's a reason there's only 6 players left from the inaugural team that was 6 years ago.
What is that? You were the 6 that were good.
Not even. I mean, they traded better players.
Yeah.
Nate Schmidt is better, in my opinion, than Brayden McNabb.
Yes.
But he was more expensive. So guess what? Have fun in Vancouver, kid.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have fun in Vancouver, says the narrator. But no, Riley Smith, I think, the Vegas Golden Knights are always open for business. So Riley Smith, I think, would be the paramount name on that team. And then you look at, some of their pending free agents that, they're not going to sign. 2 of them are former Penguins. Now, I'm not going to start the campaigning for Phil Kessel, but, Teddy Bluger returning, maybe. Then you could push Ryan Poehling to a wing. I don't know, fire Jeff Carter into the sun. But regardless, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have a listener question to get to, and we'll finish off with that one on the tip of the iceberg. Welcome back to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by Inside the Penguins, an affiliate of the Hockey News. We had a listener question, which, listen, we're always open to listener questions, especially after the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a pretty slow time. We usually put out mailbags and don't get very many questions. So if you want to have your question answered on the show, literally just DM at Ice-Burgh Podcast, and 90% chance we're going to answered on the show. There's a chance that we don't, because it might be a busy news day, or we might just not want to talk about the question, but we'll let you know if we decide that. But we did get a listener question from at Ohio Pens fan on Twitter. He asks, quote, do you think it's better to throw everything at winning this year, or just try to make it back to the playoffs, maybe win a round or 2, and hope to really go for it next season? Should the Penguins be all in for this season is essentially the question.
That's really hard, because you want to say, yeah, they should be all in this season, because you never know how much longer these guys have left. Truthfully, they're all Crosby, Malkin, Letang, they're all getting older. There's no doubt. We don't know if they're going to be able to put up that kind of season that they just did again next season, let alone the season after. And those three putting up a great season would play a huge role in, uh, moving forward and toward another Stanley Cup. I would say that you have to try and do both. Truthfully, in the grand scheme of things, 23-24, this upcoming season might be their last real chance at it with those three. Can they rebuild following? And by rebuild, I mean retool following this upcoming season with those same three guys, but also different flesh and blood around them? It's going to be a little tougher.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on the side, I guess, of gunning for it this year.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know how much time you have left. And
Yes.
you don't know what kind of cap space. Sure, the salary cap might go up next offseason.
It's supposed to jump very drastically starting next season, but
I won't believe it till I
again,
see it.
supposed to be. Again, yes. Yeah.
So utilize your $20 million that you have now properly. Gun for it. Sign a bunch of one-year deals if you need to. Revamp. Do it again next season. I don't know. We might be looking at the ends of the Crosby, Malkin, Letang tenure the same way we looked at the Brandon Tanev contract. All right, 1 year at a time. Let's see what we can do this year. Let's go.
Yeah.
And that's not a totally awful way of looking at it, but that would include gunning for it this year and figuring the rest out down the road.
This is a great question.
It is.
It's one that I don't know. Again, if you're Kyle Dubas, regardless of which approach you take, in my opinion, you operate the same exact way this offseason. Same exact way. If you're going all in for this year, or you're trying to build it to a steady increase towards a real run at it in 2024-25. The real point of divergence for me on those two paths is in season, specifically the trade deadline. How do you evaluate where the team is at once you get to that point? Because I think we can all agree last year's team was the worst Pittsburgh Penguins team we've seen in a long time. And they were still 1 point out of being a playoff team with everything that happened to Kris Letang. I understand he only missed about a quarter of the season with it, but everything that happened with him, everything that happened with your goaltender and how poorly it was mismanaged on the defensive side, which affected the bottom six as well, that team was still only 1 point out of being a playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the very least, it does not going to take many moves to get them back into being a playoff team, in my opinion.
Right.
But once you get to that trade deadline, you evaluate, am I okay if I'm Kyle Dubas sacrificing future assets to get this team over the hump and get them that extra piece that's going to get them a championship? Am I okay with saying, okay, now this year's first rounder is gone because we need to bring in the big fish at the deadline, or we need to bring in that great middle six piece that was Ivan Barbashev this year for the Vegas Golden Knights? That's when I think there's a real divergence, because I don't think, and as you've seen from Dubas and what he's at least said, he's not going to go out there and swing for home runs every single time this summer. He's looking to take advantage of cap-strapped teams, or help them, as some would say. He's looking to sign smart free agents, but not expensive free agents. And he's looking to figure things out on a very minute scale and try to slowly ease this team back in a positive direction. I think that lends itself to both potentially going for it and going, quote, all in 2023-24, and also building for some stability to get past into 2024-25. But once you get to the trade deadline, that's when, again, at Ohio Pens fan, that's when this really becomes a question. This really becomes a, hey, you've reached the fork in the road. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I will say, because that feels like a cop-out answer to some probably, because I'm saying I won it all, which the Penguins should want it all, and that's what Kyle Dubas is going to try to do. So if I had to pick, if we were at that fork in the road right now, go for it in 2024-25. Because I'm confident Crosby, Malkin, Letang, next season and the season after that are going to be good enough. It's going to be a matter of who's around you. If you get to the point where you were this season at the trade deadline and you're at that fork in the road, the team is hanging on by a thread trying to make the playoffs, do not trade away all those future assets at that moment for rental players. Don't overpay for players with term, because guess what? Those prices come down in the summer. And if the team is at that level, no amounts of first round picks are going to get them over the top to going from a team that missed the playoffs and is hanging on by a thread for the playoffs to being a championship team in 2023-24. So if I was at that fork in the road right now, I'm also projecting what could potentially happen in the season. I would say you want to give them the best chance possible in 2024-25 because the cap is going to go up. You're going to have more flexibility next season. I firmly believe that now that the escrow payments have been paid back, or at least almost paid back, the cap is going to go up, I think, at least more than $1 million next year, for Christ's sake. So I would be on the opposite side of you, because I think this team is right now where it is, not a great spot. Didn't make the playoffs. They're 1 point away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you go all in for 2023, because then I think that not only sacrifices 2024-25, but that sacrifices the gap that we've talked about so much since Kyle Dubas took over 3 weeks ago. So I would say 2024-25 if I had to, but I will tell you this question is better served around the trade deadline. And I think it'd be a great question to revisit once the season is halfway over, once you get closer to the trade deadline, or even 2 months out of the trade deadline, when you start to forecast, who could be buyers and who could be sellers.
Yeah, I would go around December even. Yeah, just because December is when we started hooting and hollering that Ron Hextall should have been making trades. It was right there. It was after that Carolina Hurricanes loss. That's when things should have really begun, and they didn't. Mm-hmm. So I would say around that time, see where we're at. See if we have that season-defining loss and we realize it right away.
Yeah.
And then get back to it again, maybe a month after that. Get back to it again around the deadline, and then that's it. See where we can go. It's a question you can ask a couple of times this season. Mm-hmm. Hell, it's a question you can ask a couple times this offseason. We have the draft tomorrow. Not that that means much, but who knows what kind of movements you do during that draft.
Oh, yeah. That's also, even if there's no moves made, that's the groundwork for a lot of deals the rest of the summer.
Mm-hmm. And then you got free agency opening up on Saturday. Then you can ask it again then. You can ask this question a couple times this week.
Yeah.
See how things go.
That's why it's a good question, because it is a utility question that you can ask in multiple different times, because it's intriguing. It's very intriguing. Before we go, I did just get a news alert from Elliot Friedman, nothing involving the Pittsburgh Penguins as of yet. There is word that it's unlikely the Anaheim Ducks they'll give a qualifying offer to Max Comtois this week. The forward is expected to become a UFA and available to everyone on Saturday when free agency opens at noon. That's an interesting name that just got added to the fold.
That's intriguing. I'm trying to find. There we go.
Listen, there's a lot of people I can tell you on Penguins Twitter that like Max Comtois.
Coming off of there's a lot of numbers there. Basically a $2 million contract. 19 points in 64 games on the very bad, very, very bad.
On the very, very bad Anaheim Ducks. And give me his age.
I said 24.
24.
We'll be 25 in January.
You don't give up on players that had that much potential at the age of 24. Now, you don't overpay them either. Yeah. Let me make that clear. You don't overpay them either. No. But taking a flyer on a guy like that, probably not a bad idea for your bottom six.
No, not awful. I mean, you ignore a lot of these numbers, but it's an interesting name. It's an intriguing name.
It's an intriguing name. And that's what I'm going to be doing all this week, is looking at my phone for tweets from Elliot Friedman and Pierre LeBrun and Darren Dreger and Nick Horwat, who's an insider as well, for Inside the Penguins. Turn on your Twitter alerts for Nick Horwat tweets, because they're coming fast and furious. And I guarantee, call me Joe Namath, because I guarantee Nick Horwat will be first to at least one signing this week. Don't make a liar out of me. Don't make a liar out of me, Horwat. Come on. Don't make a liar out of me this week.
But firing from the hip.
That's going to do it. Yeah, throw crap at the wall, see what sticks. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. I'm not going to hold you to that, actually, because, obvious reasons. We're not insiders here. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. We'll see you guys next time.